So my name is Liz Cullen. I'm Head of Clinical Programme for Maternity and Perinatal Mental Health for Hampshire and Thames Valley Clinical Delivery Network. And we're also supporting at the moment Dorset due to Southwest capacity. Dorset were historically part of our Wessex coverage previously. I'm going to ask everybody to go on mute if you're not already. Otherwise, as you can hear, there's often a bit of feedback. If we can have the next slide, please, Sarah. So just to run through some basic housekeeping. So we will ask everybody to keep muted and remain on mute unless you want to ask a specific question. It just stops the feedback coming through. Also, if you switch your camera off, you should be able to see a small toolbar if you hover over the current slide at the moment. And if you keep your camera off unless you're speaking, it just helps again with the quality of the call, shall we say. If you want to send any questions or comments, you'll see the chat sign on your toolbar. If you open that up, that will enable you to ask questions. And then we will also make sure that the webinar is shared afterwards. So it is being recorded and we will share it and share the slides following. Can I have the next slide, please, Sarah? So I think Ryland, who's kindly assisting in the background, has put everybody on mute. As there's a couple of extra people who join, please ensure that you also all put yourselves on mute. And then obviously unmute yourself and put your camera on when you want to say something, and that's what the toolbar looks like. And then we will be sharing our screens, obviously. What we're going to do with questions this morning is if people put a question in, have a look at what questions are already on there, and rather than if you've got a similar question, if you just like it with a thumbs up, then we'll prioritise the questions or the queries that we go through later on in the session. I hope that makes sense to people. Lovely. Right, so I'm just going to give a really quick update before I hand over to Jenny, just in terms of the national picture at the moment and the current situation. So obviously, in light of the service pressures and that with regards to COVID-19, both the Maternity National Transformation Programme and also the Mental Health National Transformation Programme have issued guidance in terms of what was the policy area and the original requirements, and now what is the current state of play within the COVID situation. So specifically in relation to perinatal mental health, Maternity Transformation talk about the maternity outreach clinics, and we have been in discussions with many of you about whether you had an expression of interest going forward to be an early implementer for that piece of work, and we've already got some pilots that had started within our region, but that is currently postponed until further notice. And we will get updates as and when we're the other side of COVID-19, and we will be doing some planning as we get further through this process into how do we go through a recovery phase in order to get back on track in the future. But currently maternity outreach clinics are on hold. Next slide, please. In terms of the mental health transformation programme and the long-term plan, again, the immediate priorities and next steps. So mental health have taken a stance that things should continue where possible, but only providing it doesn't impact on COVID-19 planning or response. That must be the priority currently. And then they have suggested the focus. Can I have the next slide, please? So these were the original deliverables and the immediate focus for Q1, and then activities that should be considered for slowing or deferring to later in 2020-21. So the key priority was obviously with regards to the increased amount of women accessing specialist services, the number of 47,000, And what they've said is that this should continue. So we should continue to, where possible, meet the increase in demand, and bearing in mind that there is likely to be a further increase in demand of our services currently due to the anxiety around COVID-19. So we're likely to be seeing a different cohort of women just because of the current situation. So they are asking perinatal mental health services to continue to access data and provide data to the mental health service data set, for us to continue to support staff with appropriate skills and training as far as is possible. Many of you will be aware that there is some training that obviously we've had to postpone and is being currently planned for later in the year. But if there are specific things you need in terms of training, please let us know and we will find a way where possible to manage that. And also, one of the things that has been raised recently is if there are specific skills or training in terms of physical health needs relating to COVID-19 that some perinatal mental health staff may require, then again, that's currently being looked at regionally. But again, let us know and we will endeavour to support that. So the ambition in terms of partners and supporting partners within the of women has been agreed that will be paused unless work is currently underway. So if it's already in place, continue, but otherwise that would be put on hold for the moment. And again, also in terms of expanding services from preconception to 24 months with increased availability, again, that is to be paused unless it's currently underway, and that will be picked up later in the year. I'm just going to ask very quickly, does anybody have any quick questions about that? If you do, please unmute yourself. Okay.
Liz, I've got one.
Yeah.
I was just wondering about that, the first one about the increase to the extra sort of women to be seen. I'm just wondering about whether that moderate to severe needs to be thought about, given that how our resources are, and should it just be that we're focusing on the severe? And I know that more of those moderate women are now going to become severe, but I'm just wondering in terms of the message that's going out, whether we should just look at whether we're just going to go out and see and take on the more severe and not sort of move across to the moderate right now.
I think that's a really good point, Yagada. I think, yeah, the key focus needs to be on that really specialist end. I think what we need to do is work out how we can support the systems, and particularly maternity, to manage that more mild end at the moment. And I think Hannah's presentation will be a good example of that we'll come on to later. Yeah.
Shall I just quickly say hello? I'm really sorry I'm late. My name's Sarah Kepi. I'm the service manager for CYP, which is Children, Young People and Families for Oxfordshire Mind. Apologies, I didn't quite make it on time.
That's okay. Welcome, Sarah.
That's okay.
Lovely. Okay. So if everybody else can go back onto mute again. So just to update you a little bit in terms of how things have changed in terms of communication with the national and the regional teams at the moment. So there are weekly clinical lead calls, which Jenny Walsh, our clinical lead, participates in with the national team. All the clinical leads from the clinical networks are part of that group, and there's also a WhatsApp group for that. So there is an opportunity, and Jenny will go through that later, in terms of you feeding back information to us and us passing it back up the chain, and likewise us sending out information to you from those calls. There are also currently weekly regional perinatal mental health meetings, weekly regional maternity meetings that I'm part of and the team are part of, in terms of managing the cascade of information. And again, that is a two-way process. So anything that's coming down from the top, but also anything that we need to feed back in terms of concerns from the systems and services. So those are all in place to best support us as we can at the moment. And then there has also been the creation of the regional mental health cell, which I also am currently sitting on. That's again very new. There was the first kind of system leads meeting last week. That's having a weekly meeting for system leads from the STPs and the ICSs. Last week, the focus was very much on adult mental health, but that will also encompass CYP mental health, so children and young people's mental health, and perinatal mental health. So again, there's opportunities to feed up and cascade information back as well. So we've got various avenues. So if you are stuck with an issue, please let us know and we will do our best to help you. Next slide, please. So that was the quick update from myself. I'm going to hand over to Jenny, our clinical lead for perinatal mental health for Hampshire and Thames Valley, also supporting Dorset. And Jenny, over to you.
Thanks, Liz. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining. This first webinar is very much by way of an experiment, so do bear with us. And we really value your input into the format and if this is helpful and how frequently you'd like us to do this. So do give us that feedback, because it'd be really useful in shaping what we do going forward. Could I have the next slide, please? So I just put this on to remind ourselves. So this is for anybody that's forgotten, this is about aeroplanes. We've probably all forgotten what they are. And there's that age-old adage when they do the safety thing that you shouldn't put a mask on a child if you're traveling with a child until you've put the mask on yourself. And I think in these unprecedented times, it's so important that we look after ourselves and our staff, who are everybody's got their own COVID story, everybody's got their own personal stuff going on, whatever that may be. And yet we're still in the front line. I mean, the front line isn't just physical health, it's absolutely mental health as well. We've been told, you know, we've got a very strong message nationally that we carry on seeing people face to face. So I think a lot of what we do going forward has to be about supporting our staff to be able to deliver, because if they're going out there full of their own anxiety and they've got nowhere to take that, then we will very quickly run into trouble. Okay, next slide, please. There. So you have all very kindly, a number of you responded to our ask for challenges and successes. So these will all go out on the slide pack. A number of the topics that have been brought up today will actually be covered by Hannah Wilson's presentation later, so that's really good to know. So a lot about anxiety with women, about their pregnancy and their labour, and what an appalling time to be pregnant, and hats off to all of our frontline staff who are trying to make that the best they can for women under these extraordinary circumstances. We will collate anything that isn't covered off today from these challenges and the good practice. We'll collate that and make sure that we deal with it, and anything that isn't directly answered today, we will get back to you. We'll find an answer if we haven't covered it off today. Okay, so there are a number of things around staff morale as well, and I'm hoping again that you'll find some useful stuff in Hannah's presentation, and also quite a few people talking about the new challenges of working digitally, and I think that might be a good topic for a subsequent webinar. Okay, next slide, please. We also asked what sort of support that you wanted from us, with bearing in mind that this is a time when you're probably flooded with extra emails and people sending all sorts of resources. but actually it's still interesting to see that, yes, people would still like us to send out resources. And I think when you're busy, it's really helpful to have resources coming from a really reliable place, when we can do some of the background work and make sure that you're getting the most important, the most up-to-date stuff coming through. I'm just reading. Yeah, so there's concern about redeployment, and I know that's come up on one of the questions today as well. The national team are really keen to keep an eye on this. I think there's concern about services being redeployed to plug gaps that were already existing rather than COVID-related gaps. So I think to keep an eye on that, particularly when we know that all of our services have been tasked to continue working. So we really need to keep an eye on the amount of redeployment. Okay, next slide, please.
Jenny, can I just pick up on that?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, if we're finding, please keep us updated on that. So the ambition is still there to see the additional women. Perinatal mental health is still a national priority, so therefore our services should be maintained. So if you are struggling with that, please let us know so that we can feed that back up.
Yeah, and
Thank
I know
you.
that's something that's come up on the national call last week. So one service has already, I think, lost 50% of their staff, but they're very, very keen to keep a good tab on it. Okay.
Can I ask a question about redeployment, if that's okay, whilst we're talking about it? It's Sam from Berkshire.
Hi, Sam.
Hiya. My question is about redeployment, because I've had other teams saying to me, oh, there's a national directive, but actually there is nothing. Like, we have not received anything concrete that we can then go back to our trust management to say that we need to be redeployed. We were told this morning that 20% of our hospital workforce have been taken ill with COVID-19. So I actually don't think they are trying to plug existing gaps. I know in Berkshire we have a significant gap in workforce in the frontline acute hospitals. So yeah, it would be really helpful to have some guidance, because I personally do think where we can support our colleagues, we should, but equally we need to make sure we run safe services.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll pick that up with the national call tomorrow, Sam. So what are you looking for? A national directive on redeployment?
Yeah, I think if because at the moment we're involved in redeployment and we are having to submit team members who can and can't be redeployed and how soon they can be. If other teams are saying that they are saying no, it either needs to be uniform across the country so that we feel supported, or there's other kind of guidance that our trusts need to follow. But I think we all need to be doing the same thing.
Yeah, I'll take that to the national call tomorrow, Sam. And obviously there are going to be times when they can't overrule local practice, but it certainly needs raising, because we can't leave perinatal services vulnerable because of the morbidity of the population.
Thank you.
Jenny, it's Yagda. Could I just make a comment, if that's okay?
Yeah, go.
So in Dorset, what we've done, what I've had to do in perinatal service, sort of looking at the community and the ward, is our trust actually carried out a risk assessment that the managers did. So we looked at what was essential to keep going and what activities that we were doing. So this was across the board, not just perinatal. What potentially could be postponed or moved to be done in a different way. And initially, I must admit, it was quite a laborious exercise, but in the end, I actually think it was quite helpful. And I'm just wondering whether, even if trusts aren't directing perinatal services to do that, that might be quite a good way of then demonstrating what it is and why you need the number of staff you've got, and actually looking at supportively how and when you could also help with the deployment of staff temporarily to support the wider organisation.
Yeah, sounds like a good exercise, Yagada. I guess at this stage in the game, the teams might not have time to do that, but I will definitely get on the call tomorrow and ask the question. Okay.
Shall I share what I did with you, Jenny, and then you've got something?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll email you that then. Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Jen. It's Alison.
Hello.
Just wanted to flag up as what we've got as a bit of a concern is we're wondering if we're now starting to pick up women who are more in crisis, because we normally rely on our GPs and health visitors to be picking up things earlier. But I think because the input there is going down, it's actually meaning that things aren't being picked up as early as they were. So when they do get picked up, it's in a crisis situation at times.
Hi. And is that shared across other teams?
Hi, this is Pauline Bigwood from Health Visiting in Surrey.
Hi.
Okay. Hi. I have a number of questions or follow-ups, but just about that. So in Surrey, we are still, we haven't redeployed our health visitors or nursery nurses as yet. So we are still, we're offering every mother that new birth contact. We've now increased that telephone support, and everybody's still getting a telephone or virtual, or if necessary, face-to-face 6 to 8 week maternal mood assessment. So we're recognising, interestingly enough, we've increased our advice line, and also we're ready to increase our chat health. But in fact, we've had a reduction in numbers of people telephoning generally, but an increase in the number of phone calls regarding anxiety as a theme, which I think is what we'd. So it's interesting, this people coming through, which we weren't expecting, but an increase in the theme of anxiety. So we're upping our telephone contacts and triaging as necessary for a home visit. Just thought I'd just give that from the Surrey perspective at the moment.
Thank you. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? So these are a list of resources. I'm sure you'll all be familiar with them and have been using them, but I just wanted to point out that the RC Psych and the RC Obs and Gynae updated again last week. So they're both, the second and the third link are both worth a look. The first one is about our own well-being, and I put it top because I think that's very much the theme, is about looking after ourselves so that we can still look after others. The Institute of Health Visitors, so the fourth resource down, is a new one published last week around parenting through coronavirus. And the last one is the Future Collaboration Platform, which has all of the resources at the moment are going there. So if you're going to use one place, use that one. And the link that I've actually highlighted there is from a webinar yesterday, which was about PPE and IPC in mental health settings. So there's a lot of really good up-to-date stuff on that link around PPE, both in the community and in inpatient settings. Okay, next slide, please. So now I'm going to hand over to Hannah, which is very weird because I've neither seen her nor spoken to her in this virtual world. So hi, Hannah, I hope you're out there somewhere.
Hi, Jenny, I'm here.
Oh, it's great. Very, very delighted to hear that. So I don't know how much to say about the marvellous work you've been doing, Hannah, but we had 2 psychologists in post, 2 making one whole-time equivalent, who were piloting the birth trauma work, and they did a marvellous and very, very quick turnaround with their skills to help support staff. So is that probably saying enough to introduce you, Hannah?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think Rachel is on the call somewhere as well, so she's
Oh,
also
brilliant.
around to answer
Yes,
some questions.
I'm
There
here
she
as
is.
well.
Hello, Rachel.
You can hear me,
Hi.
but I'll.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to mute myself then, and I'm going to listen and enjoy. So thank you, Hannah.
Jenny. So hello, everybody. So as Jenny said, we've had a pilot project in Hampshire with the LMS, the local maternity services in Hampshire, employing these psychologists specifically just for maternity services. And they were set up with an idea that what they would do is develop a birth trauma pathway so women can have quick and easy access to evidence-based psychological treatment for birth trauma. And also set up some antenatal anxiety groups, and also offer extra supervision to the specialist mental health midwives. And in their work, and they started back September, October time, and in that work, they had got to develop some really good relationships with their midwives, and especially the specialist mental health maternity midwives. And when COVID happened, we recognised, as Jenny said, that there is a real need to support the frontline staff. And so what could we do to offer this extra support to the frontline staff, given that COVID was happening? And so very quickly, Rachel and Hannah Moncad got together and said, well, what we could do is that we could offer a weekly online support for the mental health services. We'll just embrace new ways of working, get an online platform, allow any midwives to phone into it, and start off with just some basic psychoeducation about how do we best support each other and understand what good psychological well-being and care looks like at times of a national pandemic. And as I guess not many of us has been through a national pandemic before, this is all new learning for all of us. So we just thought, let's get on and do something. So Hannah and Rachel have been offering these weekly dial-in sessions, and we're doing it via Zoom every Tuesday. And to begin with, we've started off with some basic psychoeducation skills about what's a normal psychological reaction to an abnormal life event, and how do we best cope with that crisis, knowing that, as Jenny was saying earlier, what we really need to do is look after our staff. You know, we've got to support them to put on their oxygen masks first. And also alongside this, then Hannah and Rachel have also been very proactive at then thinking, we also know that there's a huge wealth of women who are pregnant, who are being asked to think about their birth differently and have got increased anxieties. So they're also looking at how do they do their anxiety management for women on this online platform as well. So if we go to the next slide. So I suppose there's been a lot of talk, and one of the ways of understanding how we're going to approach dealing with a pandemic like this is that there are distinctly three phases. So when researchers have looked at crises or traumas happening on a collective global or national level previously, there's usually three phases. And there's this first phase of getting ready, you know, this first phase of, right, we're in this, the adrenaline's pumping, we've got to move into action mode. And in that phase, we often see a lot of doing, a lot of planning, a lot of organizing, a lot of mobilization of activity, a very, very busy phase. People are active and busy and doing. And that's obviously needed to prepare for what's going to happen and what's coming. And then the next phase is this realization that actually this is a marathon. And if we all deploy that amount of effort and energy all in one go, we're all going to burn out. So actually what we need to do is kind of recognize that this is a marathon. We're going to need to think about there's ongoing, what's going to sustain us to get through this. So that's the marathon phase. And then there's going to be the recovery phase about actually when this does all die down and we've all moved through this and got through the marathon, then just like if you have run a marathon, you're going to need to take time to re-nourish, to re-energize, to reflect and to regroup and reconnect and think what's going to be the new normal after this. So we discussed all of these and thought about what's the best way of thinking about how we can support our midwifery staff to deal with this where they're at that moment. And I suppose at the moment we were really recognizing that a lot of people are in the get ready phase. Now we're approaching also into the marathon phase. So if you go on to the next slide. So the first thing we did an education, a psychoeducation teaching session with the midwives that Rachel presented last week. I think it was last week now, which really basically just what's the normal response. So in a crisis like this, there's a wealth of understandable human reaction and human emotional response. And what we know is that when there's a threat, the human mind is designed to go into threat mode. It's designed to go into, the responsive, reactive. I don't have time to think about this. I just have to do. And what do I have to do? I have to either fight this, run away, hide, or hoard. I have to just keep myself as safe as possible. The human mind doesn't care about whether you're happy or not. It just cares about whether you're safe. So this part of our brain kind of puts rational thinking to one side and just says, go, do. Human beings are designed to act instinctively under extreme threat. So that's what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, is that people hoarding, people protecting themselves, people moving into safety mode, threat mode. And so to just normalize that with everybody to begin with. And then actually, so what helps people feel safe again is actually to know that the leadership, to know that the staff can slow down, that we can still maintain eye contact, even if it is over online. Try to be calm and friendly. Don't criticize. Show that you understand why this behavior or this extreme anxiety is here. It makes sense. It would be really dangerous if people weren't feeling anxious right now. I think we've all heard that phrase, that if you think that this is okay, there's something wrong with you. Feeling that your anxiety is up at the moment makes sense. And in that place, therefore, we can just slow down a bit. The important thing is about clear information. Offer potential solutions, because what we know is that when people are in threat mode, their ability to problem solve logically and rationally gets minimized. So supporting people with practical problem solving and just answering questions. What will help people feel safe again is if they've got clarity, if they've got an answer. So next slide. And then what we also did was a bit of this teaching about Russ Harris is a clinical psychologist who has developed something called acceptance and commitment therapy. And he's done a lovely YouTube clip associated with this idea of facing COVID. And the idea here is that actually in a lot of threat, what we want to do is not face something. We want to run away. We want to pretend it's not happening. We want to go into denial. But actually, if we can turn up and face it with self-compassion, with courage, then actually what will help us is navigate this anxiety more successfully. So the FACE stands for focus on what is in your control. So we can't control the fact that the pandemic is happening. We can't control that we're being invited to go into lockdown or being told, instructed to. But what we can control is, how do I keep myself safe? Am I washing my hands? Am I using my PPE? I can control those things. What we can do is also then acknowledge our thoughts and feelings. As soon as we try and push our feelings away, we actually end up giving them more energy. So we talked through about how it's important to give space to just say, yeah, there is a lot of anxiety around. Yes, I am feeling very sad that I can't do what I normally do. The C is come back into your body. The human mind often gets lost in thoughts. It gets lost in hyper reality of imagining and leaning into the future. So actually one skill that we really teach as psychologists is then come back to the body, be present and grounded in actually what your body is saying. And then E, engage in what you're doing. So actually then helping you, once you've re-engaged in your body, you've acknowledged how you're thinking and feeling, get on with the task in front of you that actually is needed to be done right here and right now. And then the C stands for committed action. We know that once we're committed to doing something, it is easier. So don't be in or out. Commit to an action that that makes sense for you at this moment in time. Open up. A huge important psychological well-being tool is being able to be open with your colleagues, with your friends, with your family. We know that psychological wellness depends on our ability to be open, to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, and to be able to share that. To act from your values, so really act from a place that you've tuned into what your real values are. And Rachel yesterday did a lovely talk with the midwives on the core value of caring and how does that best get actioned at this time, not just to care for others, but also to make sure that we're using that skill, that value to care for self. Identify resources. So identify, where are my support networks? Where can I go to when I need extra help? Where can I order my PPE? Where can I get my online shop? You know, identify where those resources are. And then D, disinfect and distance. And again, what helps people feel safe is to know that they can actually action being safe. This is a real thing that we're dealing with, so not pretending that it's not happening. So facing COVID, so there is a lovely YouTube clip on that. So yeah, go to the next slide. And so the other thing that then we're doing is then online doing some, so what the midwife said after the first session is what they really appreciated was actually how do we put some of this stuff into practice. And so actually mindfulness is a great skill that is really, I think there's so much talk about mindfulness now, because this is a skill that helps us be in the present moment. When we're in threat, the mind wants to lean into the future and predict the worst. And so coming back to be in this present moment, to be grounded, to be centered, to be gathered is what's going to help us get through this. So the skill of mindfulness to just help us and draw back that mental clarity about how do we proceed. So actually Rachel led a lovely mindfulness session with the midwives yesterday on this call. So that's just a slide to show us about mindfulness. So the next slide, and then also addressing and being able to support the midwives to talk through and think about their thoughts and how this is impacting on their real genuine worry about, what if I make my family ill? I'm going to work, putting myself at risk. What if I catch it? How do I best deal with that coming back to the family? So she did a psychoeducation with them about that. So the next slide. And so we've done coping skills with talking about difficult emotions, understanding that difficult, tricky emotions will constantly pop up. We've used this analogy that actually facing a pandemic is a bit like a grieving process. So, and just like when we're grieving, because there are lots of losses, all sorts of emotions will pop up. So if you click the next button, then all of these different, if whoever's doing the slide, go to the next. All of these different emotions will pop up: anxiety, panic, guilt, just like they do when we're facing a loss. So important to just really acknowledge them and not fight them, not push them away. The beach ball metaphor, the more that you push your emotions down, just like the harder you push a beach ball down under the water, you know, it's hard work sustaining that pushing, and as soon as you let go, it bounces back up and hits you in the face. So the idea with emotions here is that we just allow them to bob about, let them surf. So next slide. And then also, so then what can we do to cope with some of the difficult thoughts that come with increased anxiety? So what we can do is think about, well, all of these thoughts about all of the potential risks that are coming our way. Actually, we can think about this is a bit like crossing the road. Crossing the road is dangerous. Going to work at this time is more dangerous than it would do. But how do I make it safe? So when we forget, there are lots of things that we've learned that make crossing the road safe, like we pause. We look both ways. We find the right place to cross. We use the appropriate equipment to help us cross if it's available. And so actually regaining what we can control, eliminate the risk. You can make steps to make things safer. And so helping people to manage, okay, if I have got this thought, how do I best problem solve to manage that thought? And then I think also the next slide is, sorry, go back one more slide. So the other thing is also, but remembering to put it in perspective as well, that although there are lots of anxiety thoughts around at the moment, actually the majority of people get well. The majority of people have mild symptoms. So remembering to also put it in perspective, just like crossing the road, you know, although it's tragic if something awful does happen, actually if I take these precautions, I'm minimizing that risk. And then we've also talked to the midwives, the next slide, about actually how do they actively care for themselves, to prioritize this, to make it just as important as caring for others at this time, that this has to be given space for them too. Next slide. And so we've also developed a set of resources that are available that we've publicised with the midwives, and I think a lot of the midwives are having their resource rooms, which they're giving that breakout space to the midwives on the front line, and these resources are going to be available for them in these breakout spaces. Yeah, next slide. So, and then the other thing that Hannah and Rachel are doing is working very hard to access and put online the anxiety management workshops for pregnant women. So they're working with the current specialist mental health specialist midwives to offer these as soon as possible. They've got dates in their diaries to offer them, and we're at that, and we kind of know what we're going to be offering in those workshops, but it's just that practical next stage of working with the midwives about how do we best help the women to know about the workshops and what's the best secure online platform to use and things like that. So they'll be coming live online in the next couple of weeks. So, and I guess we're really, really mindful about psychologists coming and being available when the recovery phase of COVID-19, when that starts to happen. So we've got these ongoing weekly workshops, drop-in sessions for the midwives while they're in this marathon phase. But then we're also kind of thinking about what are we going to be able to offer moving into the recovery phase, that there is going to be time needed for safe places to reflect, to process the impact and the learning. And often what we recognize as psychologists, or even not just as psychologists, but just as human beings, that it's only when we've stopped that the emotion of it all catches up with us, you know, and that when we take a break, that we really notice the impact of what we've done, because the adrenaline often just keeps us going. And it keeps us, and yeah. So I don't know if anybody's ever had that experience where you go on holiday and all of a sudden you realize that you're completely exhausted, because it's not until you stop. So there'll be something about that after this phase, and how do we support people after this? And to then really also be available, and I think we're all going to be needing to be mindful about how do we make sure that we get people help who are going to need that extra help as soon as possible. What we know is that if you can signpost people quicker, you know, there could well be that there are staff who do have PTSD or increased anxiety disorders, complex grief reactions. All of these mental health conditions are going to be expected to pop up in this recovery phase. And so how do we best make sure that people feel like they can access that extra help after this? I think these are all things for us to think about and consider now. Next slide, if there is a next one, or yeah, oh, I think that was it. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. Or
thanks so much, Hannah. That was amazing, and personally I find that really helpful. Even though I've seen it before, it's really good to revisit it. Yeah, so has anybody got questions for Hannah?
Can I ask something? Hi there, it's Jenny Cook here from Brighton. So you've kindly let us join in on this call this time, which is really helpful. Hello. It sounds fantastic, Hannah. Really sort of interesting and great how you've got this up and running so quickly. I just wanted to check, the psychologists that are running this, are these your normal psychologists who normally work as part of the specialist perinatal mental health service?
No.
Or are these extra people?
These are extra people. So our local LMS, our local maternity service, funded a 12-month pilot project, which was a one whole-time equivalent clinical psychology post, which we've been hosting. So the perinatal mental health team have hosted that, so I supervise them. But yeah, no, they're on top of my perinatal mental health clinical psychologists.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'm sort of thinking about how we could do something similar, but I suppose it's helpful to have the extra input there, because psychologists in the teams are quite stretched doing the stuff that they normally do in the teams, I suppose.
I wonder if we need to have a conversation with IAPT services, Jenny, to see if they can put any resource to this.
Yeah. I mean, that would be great. Our IAPT service at the moment are not doing much. They're sort of closed to, and they're not offering any treatment to anybody at the moment. They're just doing assessments, so we're really struggling with this. But yeah, it feels like that might be something that they could potentially offer. So yeah, I think that's a route that we need to maybe explore. Yeah.
Hi, sorry, this is Alison from IAPT in Southampton.
Hi,
I was just going to ask you actually about those webinars that you're setting up. One of the questions I was going to ask was about a referral route into those webinars around anxiety. Because obviously we do get a lot of perinatal mental health ladies with severe anxiety. But in Southampton, we are still taking referrals and we are still running our perinatal mental health clinic.
Brilliant. Well, I guess I don't know how exactly, as I said, we're still in that kind of operational phase where we know we've got what we'd like to do in one of those workshops, and it will just be a very simple psychoeducation workshop for pregnant women to consider how they manage anxiety at this phase. And I guess we were thinking about our referral route will be via the specialist mental health midwives.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Sorry, can I just chip in on that? It's Rachel Davis here. I was just going to say as well that I think our thinking for the first kind of what we're thinking of doing to begin with for women is literally just doing some workshops and making those open to any women across Hampshire who are currently pregnant who just want some advice. It'd be more of a kind of presentation and a learning opportunity rather than a group. So we are looking at ways to get that out across the board as almost a universal thing. And then in the future, what we're looking at is if we're doing something more specific in a group, then that's where the sort of referrals will come through the kind of mental health midwives and the specialists for people who need more than that. But in the beginning, for women, we're offering just the general psychoeducation that anybody could join into. Okay.
Jenny, can I just add a comment? It's Christine from Talk Plus.
Oh, hi.
Hi. What I don't want is for it to be thought that it's universal that IAPT services are offering skeleton services at the moment. Here at Talk Plus, we currently run business as usual, but we're all working from home over the phone, and we are in the process of setting up video calls and also direct messaging calls as well as running our courses via webinars. So we're doing our best to try and keep our service running, and I really like. Yeah, sorry, I really like Hannah's three-phase process as well, and I'm going to take it back to the team to see if they've got any ideas of how we can even more.
That's great. And I think because the offer sounds slightly different across different IAP services, could I do a shout out to say, could IAP services get back to me and let me know what the offer is for women in the perinatal period and any support we can give with that?
Yeah.
I think it'd be really good to have that centrally, as a lot of our teams work quite widely across areas.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a really good idea. Certainly, what I'm going to do is I'll speak to Tracy and come up with a plan, and then we can let you know what we can offer people at the moment.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jenny, in Dorset, as far as I'm aware, it's business as usual, apart from not doing face-to-face unless it's absolutely essential. So I don't know if there's anyone from IAP Steps to Wellbeing from Dorset, but as far as I'm aware.
Hi, yeah, so it's Alison from Southampton, but we're Dorset, Steps to Wellbeing. Yeah, pretty much the same. We are offering it's business as usual. We're running our physical courses now by or on webinar. We're still doing one-to-one work either via telephone, or we've got Attend Anywhere to do video conference calling. We're still prioritising ladies in the and fathers in the perinatal category, so they are getting treatment within probably 3 to 4 weeks at the moment. It is really quick, so from our perspective it's sort of pretty much business as usual without the physical face-to-face contact.
Yeah, good. And I guess our IAP services have got a lot to teach us as well about telephone and virtual contacts for services that aren't so used to working that way. So again, any tips you have for that we can share out more widely.
Yes, sorry Jenny, it's Christine again. Yes, in response to that, I mean it's fairly new to me as a high intensity therapist, but of course our PWPs are used to working that way anyway. So so I think I might talk to our PWPs, who particularly those who are involved in the perinatal project as well, to see if they would like to offer some feedback and some tips.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a lot of discussion in the meeting chat around digital, and I know, Hannah, I know that the reason that Zoom was used was that we wanted to get on with this as quickly as possible because we recognised that the need was out there. So that's why Zoom was used. I don't know if you're thinking of changing that for other people, or but
I do know Southern House, I mean, this conversation has been going on and on about what's the best platform, given that our current client video consultation platform, we use something called Visionable. We didn't have a group license, so you couldn't have more than 2-3 people on the call at any time. But I think the Trust have recently purchased a group license, but it looks like there's only going to be 2 licenses, so you'll only ever be able to run 2 groups at any one time across the whole trust.
Oh my goodness.
I know, so it's going to be limited, but I mean, if we get access to have a time slot, we might be able to use Visionable for the anxiety workshops instead. But I think it's also only limited to 20 people joining.
Gosh, okay.
And therefore Zoom becomes this very attractive option because, I mean, one, it's not that expensive to buy a license, so you can have it for more than 40 minutes and more people, and it's unlimited, the amount of people can join. You can, I mean, I don't know, I'm not on IT, I don't know how secure it is, and if I get told we just can't use it, then that's fair enough. But there are measures to protect it in terms of having a password and things like that. So people, and you have to wait to be allowed into the group, so the host has to be present and things like that. But again, it's this brave new world that we've all entered into, and there's not an ideal, obvious solution that's presenting itself that's both secure, affordable, and available.
I'll take that to the national call as well to see if anyone else has found a workaround for groups. Digital.
I was going to just chip in a second. So there has been some discussions on some of the regional meetings, which has been fed down from the national team with regards to Attend Anywhere software, which has been piloted in some of the trusts. I think Dorset Maternity Services have used it and are currently using it. I'm trying to find out some further information about that, but I think probably we need a digital kind of chunk of a future webinar to discuss those things. So I will try and get some further contacts and we can share that as and when we have it.
Yeah, I think Visionable is similar to the Attend Anywhere, but yeah.
Hi, sorry, I don't have the chat icon for some reason. It's Pauline from Surrey. We're now piloting and going forward with Attend Anywhere for all our new birth contacts, and and the girls that have started using it are really, really positive. What I'm interested in, I think it was just said, is if anybody's got tips on using virtual media, that would be really helpful, because they've always been using telephone, but going forward for the Attend Anywhere, it'd be great to have a document that gives any great top tips.
Okay.
And is that in terms of sort of getting the best out of that consultation? Is that what you're after?
Yes, I mean, it's just, as you say, this is a brave new world. Everybody's taking it forward and being brilliant, but I haven't actually developed anything on top tips for them, and why not, really? I think it would be really useful for those areas that people just haven't thought about.
Jenny, it's Yagada. Can I just, we do have access to Attend Anywhere in Dorset, and I have been, I think, trying to use it. Sorry, I just dropped out of the call then a minute, so forgive me if someone's already picked up on this, but the feedback generally has been that it isn't brilliant. So it sort of drops out if there's too many people, you lose the call. So Attend Anywhere, I think, may not be a perfect solution, but yeah, the RI service, Morad's been using that, so you could get some really good feedback from him if you want to know more about Attend Anywhere. But in Dorset, generally, we've been finding it isn't brilliant.
So is that in Surrey, I suppose, in Health Vis team, when using it one-to-one, is that looking at a group way?
I think it's been used one-to-one, and they've tried to use it as a group, and the feedback's the same, I think, for both.
Okay. Hi, can I just say, it's Paulette here from Surrey Heartlands, and we've been using it in some of the trusts for antenatal contacts and visits, and that's been okay at the moment. So if the issue is more around the groups as well, we probably have to look into that, but at the moment it's been okay.
Okay, well, like I say, I'll do a shout out to the national team on this, and then we can hopefully have a digital slot at any future webinars. So a massive thank you to you, Hannah and Rachel, for that amazing work. I think it couldn't have been more timely, and I think we'll move on now, because I think we've just got half an hour left now, so we'll just move on. So here we also did a shout out ahead of the webinar to ask for any workarounds that people had found. So any sort of things that might be worth sharing, so that we can learn from each other, and that's always just such a joyous part of the network, I think. So not to pick out anything, but I did like this number 3 about targeting the isolation, and having a daily lunchtime virtual drop-in so that the team can connect with each other, and a daily tea at 10 a.m. so that mums can drop in for a cuppa, which is really nice. And along that theme, I know that within Southern Health, there was a real need from within the team for a sense of community in this new virtual world, and one of the team set up a Facebook group and I think they found that really nice. But also the psychology service have been doing a daily mindfulness exercise first thing in the morning, and I think people have really engaged with that and found that really valuable. So it's those sort of quite quick and easy wins in a way, but just that for people to feel connected, and just so that we can still look out for each other when we're so dispersed. And then, sorry, I'm reading these as we go along. So number 8 is about local resources, and I think that's so important, because we can send out the national staff, but it's you guys that will know those local things that add so much more value to your work. So I think to have somebody that's sort of collating that, because a lot of places are working differently now. So NCT are doing their antenatal classes virtually now. Locally, there's various different groups that are happening online. I know that Elle's on the call from Hampshire Lanterns, and I know that they're looking to have a virtual peer support group. So it's knowing all of that stuff, because I think we're just going to need so much of that sort of thing to support these women at the moment. So the more we know about what's going on locally, absolutely the better. People saying that lack of laptops has been an issue for some trusts, and yeah, I think there's been bits of that in a lot of different places of work where there just hasn't been enough to go around, so people have had to go into bases a bit unnecessarily. And nice to hear from the Isle of Wight as well, and of course that midwifery anxiety management is available to the island, just to say that. Okay, next slide please. So we'll give the rest of the session over to Q&A. So we'll take a risk and have a sort of general Q&A session to see. I don't know if we've of the questions that have come through in the meeting, if we've managed to find some themes with that, or if somebody would like to kick off the Q&A and see. If we don't know the answers, because I absolutely cannot promise that we will know all the answers, but we will endeavour to find out. And we'd also like to get some feedback about today, and to see what you want from this in the future, because if it's valuable, we can absolutely do more of it. And if you want different format or whatever you think would work, please do let us know. So now's an opportunity for that as well. So any questions you might have, and any feedback on this session and how we can improve it going forwards.
Hello Jenny, it's Claire Mose. I'm not dialed in, I'm on Alison's call, if that's okay.
Of course.
I'd like to put a question out and just see what others are thinking, really. So we're needing to start to think about the next wave, really. I think in health visiting and in mental health services, it's being recognised that we might see this sort of second pandemic. So after, when we're in the recovery phase, when everybody regroups, as Hannah was saying, it's then that people stop and think and consolidate, and we might experience an influx of referrals in mental health in perinatal at that time, in the same way that health visiting probably will. And so I'm needing to start to think about how we manage that influx and that demand in our service when it comes in the weeks and months ahead. And I was just wanting to ask her, because at the moment we're managing our perinatal red flag ladies, our high risk caseloads, in the way that we are. We're doing a bit of sort of crisis management of that, but thinking ahead, when we know that we're probably going to see an increased prevalence of mental ill health, has anybody else started to think about how they might mitigate that risk in their service? I'm really interested to know other people's ideas on that.
Okay, I mean, for me, I would say it's a real opportunity to look at sort of whole system working, because these women are, they're all of our women, aren't they? It's in the way that the anxiety management workshop, there's not going to be necessarily any sort of referral process, because we can take a very sort of educated guess that there's going to be so many women out there that can access it and benefit from it. So it's how we just let people know it's there, I guess. I think there's also, in the same way that sort of after the war, when they were dealing with so much trauma, they had to think then about the different way to deliver therapy, because up until that point it had all been one-to-one, but that's when group therapy started. So I think groups and workshops and things where we can deliver therapy and support at scale are going to be really important. But that's probably about as many ideas as I can come up with right now, but I'll have another think. Don't know if anyone else has got anything to add to that.
Hi, it's Elle at Hampshire Lanterns.
Hello, Elle.
Hi. I'm just wondering, are we doing more to try and pick up on people who are struggling a lot with anxiety antenatally and antenatal mental health? Just because that's sort of a theme that's coming across quite a lot in the support group. It's obviously, an anxious time anyway, but I wonder if, I know we're doing the postnatal 8-week mood check, but whether we're doing anything more antenatally to try and help people manage the anxiety earlier on. I'm not sure of what sort of happens there in current day.
I think the worry would be, Al, that it might actually be less at the moment rather than more. So it's how we make sure that there aren't gaps there that women are falling through. Another thing for a future webinar might be to have a sort of encourage the third sector to join as well, and to see how we can all be working together.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking, Baby Centre, you sign up to that and you get an email every week sort of saying, this is where your baby's at and all that kind of stuff, whether to do one more on sort of anxiety and mental health to try and catch those people earlier rather than when they're in a huge crisis afterwards.
Does anybody know if Baby Buddy has adapted its material for COVID? Because that might be a really good place for it to happen.
Oh, Jenny, I've literally just written Baby Buddy down on my notes as it was discussed. Really interesting question.
And I'm wondering, it's Hannah here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Elle, I think it is a really relevant question that you've raised. So we're hopefully going to do these anxiety workshops for antenatal mums at the moment, specifically for this. And I was thinking, and whether there's something that we could integrate into Baby Buddy about that face COVID, but thinking about how do you manage your anxiety while you're pregnant, and what are the extra additional things that you need to think. So I was thinking about developing a patient leaflet at this time as well, to take care of that increased anxiety that pregnant women must be feeling right now.
Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful. And with them not necessarily being able to have partners at birth, it's just there's a whole load of extra anxieties on top of existing anxieties that
and whether the perinatal psychology team need to get together with Lanterns and think about how we could develop a patient leaflet sooner rather than later, Al.
Yeah, I think that would be really good.
Great.
I do wonder as well whether it's worth an ask to the national team about whether some aspect of the maternity outreach clinics could carry on, because we've never needed psychology more. And, if the money's there, then to have psychology in every hospital that can do what Rachel and Hannah have been doing, that would be a great start, wouldn't it?
It's Kerry Pitkin from Dorset, named
Okay.
Safeguarding Lead. We've got Maternity Matters website in Dorset, and on there we've got some videos on anxiety during and after pregnancy. So there's quite a lot of stuff on there for dads, partners, women. So there is that we've been updating that with COVID stuff as well as we've gone through.
Oh, I'll have a look. That sounds really useful.
So it's Maternity Matters Dorset, and it's under the support icon, and it's on about emotional self-care, emotional well-being. And
are you getting much traffic there, Kerry? Are women utilising it?
Well, we signpost all our women to it, so this is the way that they actually refer in as well to our services.
Okay, right, brilliant.
So it's got Dad Pad on there. I've recently worked on some emotional wellbeing videos, which we've now got up and running. I was just checking while we were talking to make sure they are on there, and they are. And that's got about antenatal and postnatal depression, anxiety. So yes, there is some information on there.
And it's Sarah Fishburne here. That in Bob they use the Mum and Baby app for all pregnant women, and that's also got some information about coronavirus and mental well-being.
That's fabs.
That's great.
It's Claire Mose again from Perinatal here at Melbury. Can I just go back to ask out to the group today? Elle made reference to the postnatal check, the 6 to 8 week one. We've heard from some health visiting colleagues on the call today that that's happening in some areas. I know that it's not happening. It's variable across the region. Does anybody know if the GPs are still offering their 6 to 8 week postnatal check, or is that considered an essential like the immunisation programme? And does anybody have any further information about that? Because I know that health visiting aren't all doing the 6 to 8 week. Some are doing it from telephone.
It's Pauline here from Surrey. There is a government document regarding saying that GPs must deliver their 6 to 8 week NIPE and their all the childhood immunisations. So that did come out nationally.
Excellent. Okay.
Does it include the mums as well?
That's part of that.
That's part of the whole. I can forward the document if you want. So you've got it, Alison.
Because they've only recently been resourced to do mums, haven't they?
No, it's been historic. It's always been mum and baby. So that's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, but it was about the mental health bit, Claire.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yeah. Oh, the maternal mood assessment and the maternal mental health is very much done by the health visiting, isn't it?
I hear what you're saying, because the prioritisation document for health visiting was antenatal and new birth and didn't include the 6 to 8 week. In Surrey, we are continuing unless we absolutely cannot, we've continued for the 6 to 8 week maternal mood as a priority for us, as much as we can do. And we are doing it because as we're talking here, we see it as a priority.
Mm. Of course, yeah, everybody would know, but yeah, I know it's variable.
Yeah, it's variable. Sorry, it's Diane Marshall, Specialist Health Visitor, Perinatal Mental Health in Oxford. We have actually got a skeleton staff in Oxford of health visitors because they've all been redeployed. So we've only got a skeleton staff who are doing telephone, antenatal and new births, and also doing safeguarding, and that's really about what we can offer at the moment.
Yeah, and sadly that's becoming a more common story, isn't it?
Unfortunately.
I agree totally. From Surrey point of view, at the moment we haven't had to go down redeployment, but and I know there are real concerns about once you go down to that skeleton staff for health visiting, this maternal mood and any early identification questions that we can ask, will be significantly reduced.
Yes.
So it's Kerry Pitkin here. So in Dorset, that the health visitors have been redeployed and their service has gone down. We do the better birth, so we actually are not discharging women. It will be over the phone till day 21, 28, and those questions are asked at that stage.
Brilliant. I'm encouraged to hear that the GP 6 to 8 week assessment is still an essential. That's one piece of good news.
Hi, it's Ruth House, Specialist Health Visitor in Bucks. Yeah, we are still doing 6 to 8 week reviews. Most of them, I think, probably by phone rather than in person or WhatsApp. But some of the staff have been redeployed, but they are at the moment being really boundaried about keeping the health visitors. I think we really do need to keep people out in the community and not bowling up at A&E for, you know, mental health stuff. So I do feel we're being reasonably well supported at the moment.
Good.
Thank you.
Has anybody got any feedback for us on, you know, whether this has been helpful, if you'd like this to happen again? Because we've got like about 10 minutes left now, so if we could just have a discussion about the next steps and what we do going forward, is that okay? Just want to try and get
Paulette Kerr here from Surrey Heartlands. Sorry, it's been absolutely fantastic. I don't know if you can hear me now. Paulette Kerr from Surrey Heartlands.
Yeah, we can hear you, Paulette.
Oh, great, thank you. In terms of feedback, it's been fantastic. In terms of just coming together and just hearing what's happening and looking at the resources that we can share as well. I'm not sure if anybody from the Maternity Voices Partnership is on the call, but it'd be really useful just to have the perspective of the women and users involved in terms of some of the discussions and just feedback as well from them in terms of how it feels being on the receiving end of some of the care that we're giving. So that was one comment. And I just wanted to quickly say as well about the Baby Buddy app that we are referring our service users and women and families to those to that area of support, and we did a patient information leaflet just recently and included that because we know they were looking at COVID and just support to parents in this challenging and difficult time, so support around emotional well-being as well. Thank you.
Okay, so can I just pick up on the point that Paulette's made? So we had discussions about this and purposefully didn't invite the MVPs or some of our support services in terms of lived experience to this first meeting, because we wanted to ask you all about that and have that opportunity to potentially share stuff on this first session. But is that shared amongst others? Would it be helpful to include our MVPs going forward? Because that was our intention, but just want to sense check with other people that that's a thumbs up. Yeah, give a thumbs up on the chat and we'll do that for next time. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
And then in terms of frequency, a lot of people are saying monthly. My only concern with that is that a month is a hell of a long time in COVID world. We would have thought maybe fortnightly, but I know it's balancing against the pressure that you guys are under at the moment. So what do you think? I just think so much can change in a month at the moment.
Yeah, Jenny, it's Jenny, it's Sam again. I was just thinking, would it be more helpful to send round a group update with emails, perhaps weekly or fortnightly, but to have this monthly, because I have about 1 or 2 daily meetings with management, like on top of all my other things. I'm sure people are in the same situation. I just wonder whether a combination of email updates and sharing information, perhaps even on Teams, and then a monthly webinar might be more reasonable.
Okay. We'll look at all the feedback and then we'll come up with a plan. I think if we record them and you have access to them, even if we do it more frequently, people could still have a look when, you know, you wouldn't necessarily have to join, you could have a look afterwards. But we'll collate all the feedback and make a plan.
Can I also ask, so we allowed an hour and a half for this first session because we were aware that there might be some technology issues, and just because we ourselves are getting used to it, and there's probably a bit more to cover in terms of thinking about moving forward. But would people prefer if it was a slightly shorter session, an hour, because that might be easier to fit into the day? And again, if people have got feedback in terms of the time of the day that we hold this, or if particular days are bad clinically, any of that feedback would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, it's quite a lot coming through on the chat, Liz, in terms of that.
Thank you. Great.
Okay, so how are we doing? Nearly half past. People have all gone a bit quiet, so I'm happy to draw it to a close now. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope it was helpful. We'll go away and look at all the feedback, and then we will come back to you all with a plan for going forward, okay? And try and find a day that suits everyone, but I know we never will because everyone has meetings on different days. So yeah, so thank you so much, everybody, and we're here, so don't wait for the next one. If there's anything that you think we can help with, just ping an email in, and you know the team is still around and we can support you in whatever way's helpful. So we will get back to you with a future date, but don't wait for that if you've got a pressing question. Okay,
thank you so much.
Thanks everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, wash those hands.